Hey friends, this is Pastor Joe from Southwest Lutheran Church in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I have a discipleship recap for you today. We're following up on Pastor Somo's message from Sunday on the Beatitudes, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus begins by sharing some blessings. Now, just a quick recap, we are beginning a message series on the Sermon on the Mount, and we've had a couple messages so far to set up the background. We saw Jesus' baptism, where he had the approval of the Father in heaven. He's got the approval to be king of the kingdom of heaven. We saw Jesus tested in the wilderness, where Satan tempted Jesus, and Jesus there proves his character. He's got the right character to be king of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Then we saw Jesus begin his public ministry, and we saw Jesus begin his preaching, and we saw the promise of the kingdom of heaven, that there would be renewal and restoration of the people of God. We saw Jesus call his disciples, and we saw the people of the kingdom of heaven, and then we saw Jesus begin his ministry of healing, and we saw there is purpose for the people of the kingdom of heaven on earth. So Jesus is the king of the kingdom. There is a promise, a people, and a purpose connected to the kingdom of heaven. And so then now that we're actually getting into the Sermon on the Mount itself, this is Matthew chapters 5 and 6 and 7, we are seeing Jesus' vision for the kingdom of heaven on earth. He's teaching his followers what he wants them to be, what he wants them to be like, the actions he wants them to take, even the feelings he wants them to feel. And so this is just this great big teaching, 3 whole chapters, where Jesus is telling us what he wants from us here on earth. So last week, Pastor Somo began with the Beatitudes, like I said, these blessings. And Jesus begins by saying things like, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And as we hear those blessings, it's interesting how they can sound a little bit like a promise and a little bit like a challenge, all at the same time. And I think that's intentional on Jesus' part. Because there's a lot of promise here. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. We're all sad. We're all grieve at some point in our lives. And it is good news for us to know that we will be comforted. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Well, it's good news for us to hear that God will make us righteous through his work. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. It's good for us. It's good news for us to hear that God claims peacemakers as his own, so that the violence and the conflict in the world will not have the final say. And so those are good news sort of statements, but at the same time, they're challenges, because they also challenge us to live a certain way, right? Blessed are the peacemakers. Well, that means I need to make myself a peacemaker. And it means that when I give in to my temptations to violence, to conflict, to anger, to hatred, and it's easy to do that sometimes because people hurt me, I get frustrated, it is easy to lash out sometimes. Blessed are the peacemakers, that's a challenge to me because I know that I am not always a peacemaker, right? And we can do that with many of these other Beatitudes. And so Jesus both promises us something new, that's good news, and he challenges us all at the same time. He challenges us to a kingdom way of life that in the end will be a blessing not just to me personally, but also to my family, also to my neighbors, and also to the world. It's kind of cool how this works together. Here's how I like to think about this. Jesus is always good news for me because Jesus comes to me with forgiveness and new life and resurrection. But when Jesus calls me to go out and live in a different way in the world, when Jesus calls me to be a kingdom person, there's a lot of challenge there for me, right? Because I got to be a peacemaker. I got to hunger and thirst for righteousness. I got to want to be the right kind of person. But when I do those things, then I become good news for the people around me. Because the people around me have someone who hungers and thirsts for righteousness. The people around me have someone who is a peacemaker. The people around me have someone who comforts those who mourn. The people around me have people who have someone who is humble and poor in spirit, right? And all these things. So there is both promise here that Jesus is going to work in us to shape us to be his kingdom people through the Holy Spirit. And there's also challenge here, right? Because I am called to live differently. So if that is what Jesus is saying to us through this passage, and I believe it is, then what do we do with this? How do we apply this to our lives? And I think it's a pretty simple explanation. And I've been kind of sharing this as a take home for a few weeks now as we've been getting ready for the Sermon on the Mount. Because Jesus is talking in general ways so far, and we've heard the background so far. And very soon we're going to get real specific in what Jesus calls us to be and what Jesus calls us to do as a people of God. My take home for all of these is just to make a commitment, right? I want to commit myself to be a kingdom person. And I know that's going to entail struggling with sin. I know that's going to entail temptation. I know that's going to entail living differently from the world around me. But all of these things are actually good because they are evidence of the work of God in my life. Jesus saves me. That's all his work. But then he calls me to go and live differently. So it's good for us to make that commitment to live as a renewed creature, as a member of the kingdom of heaven on earth, to be different for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of the kingdom that Jesus came to establish. So that's what I get from all this. I would love to hear, what do you hear from this passage? What is Jesus teaching you through it? What is Jesus calling you to do through this passage? How is your life different? Gonna be different as a result of hearing these commands of Jesus. Throw those in the comments below. If you got questions or comments, I would love to hear them as well. Have a conversation. Until next time, take care and God bless. Have a great day.